Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I know that this perspective has almost made me... well, yes, I think it has been corrected now. Thank you. I have with me in the studio Barrister Isaac Anumudu, who is a lawyer and a policy analyst. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Magu.
It's looking like it's a very complicated issue. What did you make of the second rejection, or second-time rejection of the Senate, beg your pardon, of Mr. Magu by the Senate?
Magu, thank you very much for that question. Like you said, it's looking like a complicated issue, but for me, there is no complication whatsoever. It's just that certain persons, certain gladiators, for reasons not yet known to Nigerians, are unduly hyping this issue and making a very simple constitutional issue to look as if it's complicated. What is complicated in somebody appearing before the Senate for confirmation, and the Senate, having had him, having looked at documents and circumstances surrounding the person, rejecting him, exercising their powers under the law to reject him? There is nothing complicated about this. So I'm really, really getting worried, and most Nigerians are getting worried that there must be something else that meets the eye on this issue that is accentuating it beyond what it should be. Section 2, subsection 3 of the EFCC Act, the law setting up EFCC, simply says the chairman of the commission and members of the board shall be nominated by the president, and appointed by the president, subject to the confirmation of the Senate. So it's so clear that the impression being given here, with all due respect to the Leonard Silk, Chief Robert Clark, a very senior lawyer I respect a whole lot, the impression being given by persons that hold his view and that of Professor Sagi and all of that is that if the issue of EFC chairman, the appointment, is the job of the president alone. No, we are in a democracy, and the intendment of Section 2, subsection 3 of the EFCC Act is to take away arbitrary powers from the executive, because the issue of EFC chairmanship is a very sensitive position, very powerful position, and seeing the damage corruption has done to our fabric as a society, the intendment was to put someone there who will be above board, who will be transparent, and who will be acceptable to all Nigerians.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head now, because some people will say that that's the reason why it's very controversial. The fact that the position is very sensitive and it's a very powerful position as well.
Yeah, that's why the law wants.
Some people are asking, is it that there is more to this that has met, that meets the eye, especially with the Senate's rejection of him based on a report written by the DSS?
The Senate president has explained to Nigerians. And leave his explanation, because we're no longer in those days where it's the leader that tells us what is the truth. Nigerians have come of age. Nigerians have become very enlightened now that they make up decisions and opinions for themselves. So apart from what the Senate president said recently, that Magu was not rejected based on the security report of the DSS alone, some of us watched the screening, and we saw that Magu was rejected not just on the report alone, but based on his inability to show competence for the job. He was asked critical questions relating to his job, which he could not answer. And if that's the job of the Senate, to look at this man, to confirm, to see if this person, purportedly being appointed by the president, is fit for the job. He was asked critical questions, for instance, on the issue of corruption. A particular gentleman, a retired military officer, was mentioned. The name, the surname, the title, the designation of that individual was mentioned to Magu and said, do you know this man? He agreed he knows the man. He even mentioned where and how he met the man, just about some years back, few years back. And he was now told specifically that this report says that this man is your front. This man is collecting bribe on your behalf. And this man is doing sundry things on your behalf. And Magu was given the floor, fair hearing, before the Senate. Explain your relationship with this man. He only said how he knew the man, where he knew the man, when he knew the man, but refused to make any reference to this issue of corrupt relationship with the man. He avoided it clearly. We were all watching. It was live. Another thing again, he was asked a very important question concerning that job, because that's the whole essence of separation of powers. That's the whole essence of Section 2, subsection 3. That's the whole essence of taking the issue of appointment and confirmation of the EFC chairman outside the exclusive purview of the president and making it a thing to be decided by the entire Nigerians through their representative in the Senate, by saying that, look, this office has a lot of influence and power, and it's important for EFC to succeed. All of us will suffer if EFCC fails. So let it be somebody who is transparent. The Senate now asks him, the way you are doing your job, you are doing it in disregard to the Constitution, in disregard to the FCC Act that set you up. You are abusing people's rights. You are abusing the rule of law to the point that you are making yourself the accuser, the investigator, and the judge. There are cases where EFCC arrests people on suspicion of fraud and insists that the person so arrested should pay the money or part of the money he is accused before he can be granted even bail. In other words, you have found him guilty already. You have convicted him of having stolen the money or having been corrupt, and that's why you insist you now do the job of the court that should find him guilty and fine him or order him to make restitution. You now tell him there is a particular case, whether it's true or not, of one former minister of defense, what's his name, the guy from Lagos, who was asked to deposit 100 million naira before he could be granted bail. So in a situation like that, the law does not accept that. We are lawyers. The law says that under Section 36, you are presumed innocent until proved guilty.
Mr. Anumudu, I'm going to ask you to, let's take this, one after the other. You have said that, the Senate was within their right to reject Mr. Magu. But then we cannot discountenance all the other shenanigans that had happened before now. We remember that initially they had rejected him based on the security report, even though there was some controversy as to whether or not he was rejected. Now the presidency did take up this matter. He was queried by the Attorney General of the Federation on the instructions of the President, a query which he replied to. According to the Presidency, he had satisfactorily answered the questions that were raised in that query. Don't you think that it would have been proper for the Presidency to have sent or availed the Senate the opportunity to look through his response, because that was the basis upon which he was rejected in the very first instance?
Procedurally, if we talk about what ought to be, what should be, you're very right. It would have been okay in building the ongoing effort at harmony between the executive and the legislature. It would have been okay to take the legislature into confidence, particularly the leadership, and say, look at this report, blah, blah, blah. But that would have made no difference. I want the point clear. I want Nigerians to understand what is going on. Some people are bringing in irrelevant issues to becloud us here.
Are you saying the security?
Even if the president
Just a moment.
has written a letter to National Assembly saying, I, President Muhammad Buhari, have confirmed and investigated and certified Magu 100% fit for the job. He is a man of integrity. The Senate is not bound by that opinion. That is what Section 2, subsection 3 wants to avoid. It wants to avoid the president alone, the presidency alone, the executive alone, choosing who will be the chairman of EFCC by saying whoever you appoint, however good he is, the whole Nigerians through their senators must look at that man and accept that he is good for us, because we don't know why the executive may have appointed that person. And if you look at, that's why I said there is now more than meets the eye. The way some persons, and that's why I think the president should take the advice of some persons. His wife has made some opinion. Rufa has said some things about people working with the president. And I know the president apparently means well for this country. He needs to look inwards now and take out those persons that are clogging the wheel of the progress of the executive. A situation where the first time the EFCC chairman was rejected, Professor Issa Sage, who is the chairman of the President's Anti-Corruption Committee, who should know the importance of this anti-corruption fight, that it must not fail, and that EFCC must be headed by a man of unquestionable integrity, just like Caesar's wife, must be above board, above suspicion, above accusation. So Professor Sage the next day said, Magu will remain EFCC chairman, whether the Senate likes it or not. This is a professor of law who knows the clear meaning of Section 2, subsection 3 of the EFCC Act, that you can't remain...
Perhaps he definitely has information that is not available to us.
No,
I mean, if you are aware of the information he has,
there's no information.
Because even right there on the floor of the Senate, you did hear that, Mr. Magu had certain words. He first of all raised the dual nature of the DSS, issuing a dual report on him on the same day. Isn't that questionable?
That has been overtaken by events. I'm not going to go into that now.
Why has it been overtaken by events?
I will explain. I don't want to go into the rivalry, apparent rivalry, or whatever that may exist between
Isn't that important?
EFCC and...
Isn't that important?
It's not important.
Isn't that the basis of the questions that were raised to him on the floor of the Senate?
I will explain why it's not important. Now, I don't want to go into that details, but I said it's been overtaken by events because on the day of this final hearing now, the Senate, in order to avoid this type of ambiguity being flung around, wrote again to DSS. There are complaints about you having given us 2 conflicting reports about Magu. Which of these reports should we act on? Because Magu is coming before us again, this time for open screening. And the DSS wrote on 7th of March, referring to one. So, in other words, that confusion has been cleared by the DSS, referring to one of the reports. Okay, assuming you have 20, this is what we know about Magu. And in that report, DSS made damning allegations, more than 14.
Shouldn't the DSS have been queried by the Senate? Shouldn't they ask and say, but we understand that you sent this particular report to the executive?
Don't forget, DSS is not an arm under the Senate. So it could have been easy for the Senate to query the clerk of National Assembly and query, but DSS is doing its own job of sending security reports, which they do in all cases. That is also why I disagree with some of the commentators who give the impression that it was wrong for DSS to send its security report direct to the Senate. No, DSS has been doing that from ages. It is a requirement of the DSS to the Senate to send security report on anybody being screened by the Senate.
So in your opinion now, you don't think that Mr. Magu should keep acting?
No, he has no business acting because without due respect to him, the good thing here is that I don't have anything against Magu. I don't even know him personally. He hasn't done anything adverse against me.
Would you say he has been doing, just before you answer that question, would you say that he has been doing his job, carrying out his job effectively?
With all due respect. But let me answer the first question before I come to this, because so that my opinion is not subjective. Magu has no business acting anymore because, for one, you see, we must begin to respect the law in this country. Once we put aside the law and take any action based on sentiment, based on how we feel, we're going to run into the problem with governance completely. The law setting up EFCC does not talk about acting.
I think you answer both questions when we return from this break.
Yes,
Please stay with us.